Hi, everyone. It's topic 12, records management, and we are talking about the way that a company records data and keeps their records in a business establishment. This is one of the big topics because I normally see a lot of questions on records management, whether it be the way that files are organized or just the way that they should be filed. And so this is something you would definitely want to pay attention to. So let's get into it. Of course, welcome to the virtual space. Let's work together to learn, share ideas, participate, and learn something new. The wise always seek knowledge. Why records management? Why is record management even important? What is records management? Well, records management is the way that the company looks at a few things as it relates to keeping documents and important information, storage, ultimately. And so records management is concerned with these four activities: developing a system of storing records and identifying which records are kept, because you have to understand how to keep records and you have to understand the system in place so that you can quickly find things that you need to find. It's also concerned with arranging records in an organized manner so that they can be found quickly, just like I said, protecting records from damage or loss, and then determining how long records should be stored. It's a plan for record keeping in a company. How long do we keep a record? How do we keep a record? How do we organize it so that you can understand where to find what you're looking for? All of this is a part and a key part of records management, which happens in every business, no matter how small. Some persons are more simple when it comes to simple desk drawers, while others have to involve a whole storage room or filing room. And so it's going to vary based on business, of course, but to some degree, every company is concerned with how their records are being kept and managed. When we talk about records management, some companies are big enough to have what we call a records management clerk, and their duties are going to be to make sure, prepare documents for filing, making sure everything is in the file, processing data, processing files, putting them through, managing records, making sure that everything is in order and being put back and being kept organized, and then retrieving documents when persons are requesting the use of documents. And so those are going to be the main duties of records management clerk. Anything to do with making sure the system is being followed, making sure that the documents aren't getting lost, that's the job of the records management clerk. And so when we talk about records management clerks, like I said, big companies have the option of having staff just for that. But depending on how a company is set up, records management clerks can have different tasks, or records management in the company can look different. And so a key thing they like to talk about in a number of these areas is going to be centralization versus decentralization. If you recall from a previous topic, centralization involves one set of people doing something for everybody, versus decentralized, meaning everybody does their own thing. And so depending on the setup of the company, they can have centralized or decentralized records management. And so centralized records management just means that there's one department responsible for filing documents and records for the entire organization. And everybody just kind of comes to them when they want to file, when they want to take a file out. And so ultimately, they are responsible for making sure that the records stay in order and that things are being brought back. Versus if it's decentralized, each department keeps their own records. And so there's no need for one big department focused on filing documents. And so it's a benefit or loss depending on the size of your company. If your company is huge, it's going to be difficult trying to find different files in different departments, versus if you have a centralized department and you know everybody uses files, it's going to be easier to have a centralized department as opposed to a decentralized one. And so we're talking about records. All of this is about records. And it's important to understand what records are and how they can be classified. Because could you imagine a company trying to keep everything? It's impossible. You don't have enough space to keep every single document. And so that means in order to know what needs to be kept and what needs to be let go, oftentimes we have to learn how to classify records. And so records are classified according to their importance and their usefulness. And so the classifications are as follows. We have vital records, which are your essential records. When you think of vital, think of, oh my God, breath in our lungs is vital. And so it's essential and it's irreplaceable. If it's lost, it's going to be hell trying to figure out how to get my kidney back. And so when we're vital, it's hard to replace them. And so you want to make sure you keep them because you need them and you want to make sure that you never lose them. And so these are things like legal documents, tax documents, financial records, and secret formulas. KFC, the secret formula is a vital record that cannot be lost. And so they have priority, and these are definitely your items that are going to be properly filed and properly secured as well. Because depending on how irreplaceable they are, you can't just leave them out in open storage. Secret formula is probably in some type of safe or something somewhere, but it's not going to be with the regular records, with your vendor payments and all this other stuff. No. Important records are those needed for the business to operate smoothly. So if I wouldn't call them essential, important documents would be maybe something like your invoices that you send to customers. You need them because you need them in order to get paid. You need them in order to determine what inventory left the company or what services have been provided. And so they're considered to be important. When we think of useful, we think of things that are convenient to have but replaceable. An invoice can also fall in this category as well, because they're kind of replaceable, but it all depends. If your customer signs off on invoices, and that's the only way they're going to make a payment, then you can't lose a signed invoice. You could lose an invoice that isn't signed because you could just reprint it. But if customers sign on invoices and things like receipts and stuff like that, then they're considered to be very important and hard to come back to, or maybe difficult to get back to a signed copy if a customer is not satisfied or something like that. But useful information can be things like what's convenient to have, maybe message pod notes and letters and different memos, internal memos, be convenient to have, but once you read it, it's just useful. I don't know that it's something that you need to absolutely keep. And so things that are useful, convenient, but replaceable. And so you may consider some of those things not worth keeping, depending on the office and the environment of the office space. And then finally, we have your non-essential records, which give you good information, but if they're lost, they're lost. There's no need to keep it for a long period of time. And again, that could be like a fax cover sheet or something like that. You don't really need, it's not essential. If you have to resend the fax, you just create a new fax cover sheet. It's not a big deal. You don't have to find the original. And so when it comes to records management and systems, the first thing we have to do is understand that there's some records that need to be kept and some records that don't. That ensures that the system only keeps filing or keeps a record of things that are important and vital and maybe useful. Now that we know what type of classification we can have for our records, now let's talk about the filing systems and the way that we can file these records. We first have to figure out what actually needs to be kept. From there, we need to figure out, well, how are we going to keep them? How are we going to keep them in a way that's organized, that we can understand and find what we're looking for when we need to find it? And so that comes with identifying filing systems and selecting the best filing system based on the company and what's being kept. And so there are 5 filing systems. They are the alphabetical name system, subject system, geographic, numeric, and then chronological. And so underneath these 5 systems, these are ways that you can organize your records that you decide to keep so that they can be easily found at a later date. And so just going through them itself, the alphabetical system itself is the most common one, and it is what it is. It's based on organizing the names and placing in an alphabetical order from A to Z. Essentially, that's your alphabetical system. The subject system is when companies decide to first group something in form of a subject, and then it's alphabetized. So for example, let's say the company has multiple vehicles that they're keeping records of insurance for. The company can choose to put all of them in one folder underneath the insurance company, or they can decide to separate it by vehicle and say, okay, vehicle 1, vehicle 2, vehicle 3, vehicle 4, which would be the subject, the name of the vehicle, and then underneath, on the side of it, put insurance forms, insurance claims, have different files for different vehicles, but you're grouping it by vehicles instead of grouping it by the name of a vendor or something like that. That's a way of subject system, finding a common subject and then alphabetizing the subject, and within each subject, alphabetizing the actual files or folders. When we talk about geographic system, it uses a form of alphabetical as well, because what happens in the geographic system, we are filing documents and items based on geography. So let's say a company has multiple locations around the world. Maybe they want to organize, they don't want to have one file that contains payments to one particular vendor for all of the locations together. Maybe they want each location to have its own file for that particular vendor. And so what happens is maybe they're going to have a file, let's say they have US locations. Well, there's going to be one general section for USA, and underneath USA, it's going to be broken down further into, let's say, Miami, Mississippi, New York, and then so on and so forth. It starts with a country, and then it's broken down even further. First, it's organized by country, then it's organized by city, then it's organized by even smaller locations. And so in a geographic system, it's mostly organized by location. When we look at a numeric system, this is a system that only works when numbers are given. So if you have customer numbers, you can organize files by customer numbers. And so ultimately, this one is infinite, because as we know with numbers are infinite, they keep going. And so you could honestly keep going with any combination of numbers in a numeric system. And so that is one that is very infinite. When we talk about it, we're just comparing numbers going from smallest to largest when we're organizing the numbers themselves. And so under the numeric system, they actually have 2 additional ways of keeping track of the numbers, and that's going to be terminal digit, which is looking at the last 2 digits as a deciding factor, or middle digit, which is looking at the 2 or 3 middle digits to look at the deciding factor of how to file a particular file. Then we have the chronological system. The chronological system is used to arrange records in order of date. And so normally it's either going to go from the newest date forward or the oldest date going back. So that means something in July is going to be filed ahead of something in September or ahead of something in March, depending on which way the company decides to go in date order. So chronological, just the same thing as date order. Now, when we're talking about filing systems and filing orders and everything, we have to talk about supplies. because that's a part of the system. How are we going to file? What supplies do we need to file? And so these are some things that are common supplies that are going to be used in the filing process. Things like file folders. You need to have folders to put your files in. And so they normally hold a lot of the paper documents, and they're key to a good filing system is the little components that go along with it. When we talk about files, we're going to notice that all of these different files actually have different little tabs. And so these tabs are where you normally would put the information related to the file itself, like whose file is it? You would normally put a label or, make some documentation on the name or the filing system used. If it's numbers, if it's geography, you would put that information on the tab so that it's clear to identify and be able to see what's on the tab. Tabs can be full, half, third, or fifth cut. And what that means is just that it all depends on how they slice the top part of the actual folder. If it's full, that means that there's one huge tab at the very top. If it's half, then that means the top is cut in half. If it's fifth, then that means the top is cut into 5 different pieces. So the width of each tab is about a fifth of the top. And the third, of course, is a width would be a third of the top. Okay, and each of those tabs, even though they have their different cuts, they have certain positions, and those positions are going to be based on how they're cut. So if it's a half cut, then it's going to be either first position or second position, because it's only 2. Versus if there's a third cut, then there's going to be 1, 2, or 3. If it's a fifth cut, then it's going to be 1 to 5 position. And so just think of having a box and splitting that box up into 5. The first fifth of that box is going to be the first position. The second one is going to be second position. Third is going to be third position, and etc. We have labels. Like I said, labels can go on the different tabs as well to help you identify the file itself and identify the contents. We have things called guides. And so guides are just like tabs, but they're big cardboards that help to fully separate sections. So let's say I have a lot of files from A that begin with A. And so I can have a guide at the very beginning that says A, and at the end of it, I have one that says B. And so it's going to help me to clearly identify when I'm switching over from one to the next. So if it's geography, when I'm switching over from the US states to Europe, maybe I have a guide, and that's going to help me to identify or guide me in identifying these different sections within the drawers that I'm using to put my documents in. There's something called cross-reference sheets, and that's just a document within another file that points you to information that may be helpful that's in another file. And so usually use a cross-reference. Let's say I'm looking for information related to those vehicles, and I go to one of the vehicle files, but I don't find what I'm looking for. If the information I'm looking for, let's say license information, maybe in another file, a cross-reference sheet will say, hey, if you're looking for information on licenses, license fee and whatnot, you can look in this particular file. So it just guides you to another file that may contain more information on the same subject, the same person, the same anything really. Requisition forms and cards are useful because oftentimes when a company has a big filing system, persons may want to use those files. And so you use things like requisition forms to requisition or request that a file be pulled on your behalf. And so normally it's written up by the person requesting the file, given to the records management clerk, who then pulls it and signs off and says that, okay, I gave this file to this particular person on this particular date. And so that is then used and put in the file slot so that anybody who comes back to look for the file, if it hasn't been brought back, they know, okay, so-and-so requested this file and so has this file as of this date. And so it just gives information on files that have been taken out, because of course, in the system, you need to know exactly where things are if you want it to be organized. And so requisition forms are used in that regard, just like think of a what's it called? Think of a library card. The library card, the card is left behind and you take the book and you sign off as the person that took the book. The requisition form and out forms are similar to the library card, letting you know who took the file out. And once it's brought back, then that form is now discarded because it's now in its proper slot. Okay, and so these just hold the space for missing files when they have been requested. And then, of course, my favorite word, tickler system. And this is a temporary record of all outgoing correspondence arranged by date. And so this is something that's normally can be kept as well too. Maybe persons keep a record of all emails sent out or all memos sent out, and normally that's done in chronological order by date, making it easier to find certain things. These are the tabs here that I refer to. As you can see, a tab can start here. There's one in the middle here, this one here. Because there's only 3 slots, 1, 2, and 3, that cover the whole entire top. This is a third. This is the first. This is the second, and this is the third position of 1/3 cut tab. And so, like I said, the position is depending on where it fits on the top of the actual folder. The cut represents how many times it's actually divided. And so this is a third cut, and there are only 3 positions because there's a third cut. Normally, what they do is when they have first positions, these are considered to be your primary guides positioned at the left of the cabinet. And so these are the main guides letting you know, okay, this is a particular area, or this is a particular section. When we have second positions, third positions, fourth and fifth positions, they go a little bit more specific. They go into a little bit more specifics. A secondary reference or something that's used to pinpoint the location related to a specific subject, or the guide for individuals or company files. And so depending on how a company works, they can use certain tabs for certain things. But the first position tab is always considered to be the biggest one, or the primary, or the main one. And then they use these other tabs to show that these, are less important than a first tab per se. But like I said, it all depends on companies and how companies use it, because not all companies go by this, especially nowadays, because it's just a matter of making sure you have sufficient folders. Other equipment that can be used, or equipment that can be used in the filing system process, is going to be filing equipment, vertical filing, which are your different drawers, vertical and lateral filing. Some longer than others. Some of the thinner ones are lateral filings. We have shelf file folders. That's your folders that are used within the drawers. We have sorters. These things can be sorters. They help you to sort files before putting them away. We have card files, desk files. These can be used on your desk as well, and micro record files. So there are different ways and different pieces of equipment that can be used to help you to properly file your documents. When we talk about indexing, whenever you see the word indexing, know that there are different things and tools that can also be used in the indexing process. We can use cross-reference cards, like I said, which point you to other files that contain similar information. Then there are out sheets and cards. Whenever a person takes out a particular file or requests a particular file, you can put an out card in its place, letting anybody else who comes behind to look for the file know that it's already out. We have tickler files. We have things like color coding to make it easier to find what you're looking for. And then database, which is just an electronic format and an electronic record of files being kept in, whether it be an Excel document or a program that allows you to keep that information and let you know, okay, I have created files for these particular things. These are the numbers related to those files, making it easier to find files. And so that's the purpose of a database, and all of this helps with indexing. Next, we're going to talk about storage. And so storage is very key to the records management system as well, because it all starts with, first you have to create the file, and you have to put the information in there. You have to put it in a specific place, and you have to know how to store it. And so ways information can be stored are through paper, magnetic media, which are things like your floppy disk, your hard drives. Those are flash drives. They're all magnetic media. We have things like CDs or DVDs. We have micrograph systems, and then we have imaging systems. The micrograph and imaging systems tend to be much older. They relate to things like these, or they actually have, depending on the size of the company and what they're storing, it may be easier for a company to store on them. So there might be some companies still using these outside of things like your USB and your flash drive and jump drive. When choosing a storage method, some cost factors to consider are going to be the equipment. What equipment is needed? So if you're using one of the micro films, you need to, first of all, have the microfilms, and then you need to have a reader in the event that you want to go and look at those microfilms and get information. There's a specific way that they can be read, and that requires you to get the equipment along with reading it. And so that's a little bit more costly. You have to think of the supplies that go along with it. If you're storing by paper, that means you're going to need to have a whole lot of paper. If you're storing by, let's say, flash drive or a CD, then you're going to need to have a lot of CDs to store information on, a lot of USBs. And so depending on the cost of them, you may want to consider, that's going to help you to consider the right storage method for the company. You also have to think about human resources, because human resources normally has to deal with the employees. Somebody is going to have to sit around and make sure that the information gets put on the storage devices and protect the storage devices. And so if you have a whole file room full of files, that's going to require more persons' help in order to keep that organized, in order to keep everything stored properly. And so human resources is a major cost related to storage. And then finally, we have destruction costs. And so most companies have a retention plan, which means that they try to figure out how long they need to keep information for before they destroy it. In most instances, 7 years is the legal requirement for holding information. And so after a while, some documents are going to need to be destroyed just because you don't have sufficient space to keep years and years and years of information, not unless you're converting it from paper to something else. And so all of that has to be taken into consideration when storing media and storing files and choosing a method of storing. And finally, let's talk about the record life cycle. So we actually went through it over time, but I just wanted to point out that when it comes to the record life cycle, CDU manages drugs. That's the one I like to use. The record goes from creation. So first we create the file, or we collect the information from the file. Then we're going to distribute it, send it where it needs to go. After somebody has requested it, they're going to send the file to them. They're going to use that file. Then after using the file and it comes back, we have to now put it back in its place and make sure we maintain the proper filing, the proper order, make sure nothing is damaged and all these other things. So we have to properly maintain the record. And then after a while, like I said, after the time has gone by, maybe 7 years or so, it comes a point when you're going to have to dispose of or destroy the record. And so that is a major part of the record life cycle. All right. And so that's it for our records management system. It just gives you a general idea of the things that companies need to think about when they're deciding how they want to record or keep records and files of important and vital documents. And so first they have to identify what's important to them, what's vital, and they have to develop a plan. How long do they want to keep these things? Where are they going to keep them? Do they have staff to keep them? Are they going to centralize? Are they going to decentralize? These are a lot of the questions that are being asked when, or being thought of when a company is coming up with a plan for records management. There are a number of different filing systems that are being used, so they also have to figure out which is the best one for them based on the information that they're trying to keep. And so all of that is what's going to be taken into consideration when a company is looking at these filing systems. They have to also take into consideration storage and the cost related to storing these records, the cost relating to disposing of the records, and the cost related to having employees to assist with managing the records. All of these affect the decision on how the company decides to store and keep their records. I hope that helps. Thanks for listening and happy studying. Hi, Brenda here. I just want to take the time to say thank you for choosing this course. Thank you for choosing yourself and for preparing as you should for Office Procedures BGCSE. Look forward to more from me and Business Teacher Powell, and I look forward to seeing you in other classes. Bye.